4th meeting of the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. For those who are here in person, please remember the health and safety guidelines as per the cards on the table to prevent audio or feedback incidents. This meeting is in public, and the last 10 minutes will be in camera so that we can complete adopting our freshwater report. I'd like to warmly welcome 2 new members to this committee. Now that we're having a meeting in public, we have MP Mr. Watchorn and MP Mr. Millett joining the Liberal members of this committee, and we look forward to their contributions. On a aussi Madame Provost, the Honourable Nathalie Provost, the Secretary of State for Nature, here to provide a briefing on Canada's strategy to protect nature, along with several people from several different departments, so I'll just welcome them here. We have Kathy Graham, the Director General of Marine Planning and Conservation from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Welcome. We have Kaylee Levesque, Associate Deputy Minister, President of the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, and direct support for Secretary of State for Nature from the Department of Industry. And we have Tara Shannon, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Canadian Wildlife Service from the Department of the Environment. And we have Andrew Campbell returning to us, Interim President and Chief Executive Officer of Parks Canada Agency. So welcome everyone, and thanks for being here today. We will start with Secretary Provost. Vous avez 5 minutes.
You will have 5 minutes to deliver your remarks. The floor is yours. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee and colleagues. I'm very pleased and honored to be here with you today. Thank you for welcoming me and for inviting me to appear before you today to speak about A Force of Nature, Canada's strategy to protect nature. Nature is at the heart of our Canadian identity and of our sovereignty. Protecting our lands and waters means protecting what defines us. As Canada's first Secretary of State for Nature, my role is to work closely with my cabinet colleagues to advance Canada's priorities regarding the protection of nature and our natural heritage. I approach my duties as if I were a project manager. My goal is clear: to help achieve the protection of 30% of Canada's lands and waters by 2030. This commitment is at the heart of A Force of Nature, Canada's strategy to protect nature. A month ago, the Prime Minister unveiled this ambitious strategy, which aimed to strengthen the protection of Canada's lands and waters and to support biodiversity. Today, I will give you an overview, and then I will answer your questions. Nature is essential to Canada's resilience, to the well-being of its communities, to climate action, to reconciliation, and to national security. But nature is under pressure in Canada and elsewhere due to climate change, urbanization, and biodiversity loss. At the same time, floods, wildfires, and extreme weather events are on the rise. In this context, protecting nature is not just an environmental priority, it is essential to building a strong Canada. Canada's strategy to protect nature sets out a clear plan to conserve nature, support economic growth, and build a stronger, more resilient country. It provides for an investment of $3.8 billion over 5 years to achieve our goal of protecting 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. And it is based on 3 pillars. Firstly, protecting nature in Canada by conserving and safeguarding ecosystems on a large scale. Secondly, building Canada well by integrating nature into the planning of infrastructure and into resource development projects. Thirdly, valuing nature and mobilizing capital by stimulating private investment and integrating nature into economic decision-making. As part of this third pillar, an expert task force on natural capital accounting and nature financing will be established this spring. Its mandate will be to formulate recommendations aimed at better recognizing the value of nature, repositioning conservation as a long-term investment, and mobilizing more private capital to complement the public funding that has traditionally dominated this field. Together, these three pillars demonstrate that nature conservation and economic growth can go hand in hand. Furthermore, the recognition of Indigenous peoples is at the heart of this strategy. Their leadership and ancestral knowledge are essential to achieving concrete and sustainable results. That is why more than $230 million will be invested to support and strengthen Indigenous-led conservation initiatives, including the launch of a new Arctic Indigenous Guardians program. In conclusion, we must recognize that the decisions taken today will have lasting consequences. Either we leave behind a country where nature is protected and resilient, or future generations will have to deal with its degradation. With a force of nature, our choice is clear. Madam Chair, it is up to us to act with seriousness, with ambition, and in collaboration to protect nature today so that it can continue to protect us tomorrow. I would now be happy to answer any questions members of the committee may have. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The Conservatives and Mr. Leslie, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister. Now, your nature strategy says that Canada must add at least 1.6 million square kilometers of protected or conserved terrestrial area by 2030. Now, for context, that's roughly 2.5 times the size of my home province in Manitoba. So can you tell this committee exactly where this land is coming from?
Merci, Madame la Présidente, pour les...
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. Thank you for your question. These lands come about from all kinds of initiatives that are either initiated by Indigenous communities and are often initiated by private landowners or by provinces, because provinces are responsible for 75%, maybe not responsible, but are the proprietors or the guardians of 75% of territory. So the lands that will be conserved, like the ones that have already been conserved, come about from all kinds of different initiatives that come about as a result of consultations and discussions with provinces, with municipalities, with the concerned communities, and this will allow us to achieve this result.
On this landscape that will be protected, will hunting and fishing be restricted in any way on any of the new lands or waters that you plan to count towards your 30 by 30 target? Yes or no? Simple question.
Ça dépend. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for your question. I know many hunters and fishers ask that question. Everything depends on the method of protection that will be recognized and determined in different contexts. For example, in general, when the protection initiative comes from Parks Canada, hunting and fishing is allowed for First Nations in the context of respecting their ancestral activities. But in other modes of conservation, hunting and fishing can be allowed based on understood and defined frameworks to allow sustainable hunting and fishing.
Of the land you count towards your 30-30 will be allowed to have hunting and angling on it, whether First Nations or non-Indigenous people?
Aujourd'hui, je ne peux pas.
Today, the answer is not fixed because we do not know. Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, for your question. I'll start again. Today, all the lands that will be protected have not been identified. It is not possible to answer precisely what proportion of lands will allow hunting and fishing and what proportion will not. What we know is that conservation does not stop hunting and fishing activities automatically on that land.
Wholeheartedly, and I think that's why so many in the angling and hunting community are deeply concerned that that percentage might be higher than zero. perhaps significantly higher. So I hope you take that into consideration. Now, your government has referred the Churchill Plus project to the Major Projects Office, while also moving ahead with, as indicated in this strategy, the Seal River Protected Area in northern Manitoba. So my question is simple. Can you guarantee that the Seal River designation will not limit any future road, rail, port, energy, or transmission corridor that could impact that project?
Les projets
The projects of national interest are, of course, important for our government. Thank you once again for the question. The projects we have are important for economic development. We maintain the vision we want to have, which is to have economic development and economic autonomy. So the projects of national interest as you saw in the strategy, there's a pillar called Building Canada Well. So using tools like cartography and reflections that are recognized internationally in a mitigation strategy through other conservation tools like cultivated lands, it will be possible to mitigate problems, but to also allow for economic development. Canada is a big country. 30% is far from 100% of our lands. So we will work with communities, with provinces, with developers to be able to reach our goal of 30% and to also be able to reach the goal of economic development we want to reach.
Is the Building Canada Well section, to me that looks less like a project approval and more of a layer of conditions that are going to be added to any project. Now, our Premier in Manitoba, Wab Kinew, has said that the Prime Minister wants LNG moving through the Port of Churchill by 2030. Now, potentially that would be through some sort of an energy corridor that I assume would have to go through the Seal River watershed area through a pipeline. Is it true that the Prime Minister has asked the Premier to have natural gas flowing through Churchill by 2030?
Encore une fois, merci, merci pour votre question.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, for the question. The big projects are important, and large lands to preserve are important as well.
How these two things can very much be at odds. You have a massive area in which you're saying is protected, and directly behind it, where a pipeline would have to go through, is the Port of Churchill. How do these two things line up?
Time is up.
Well, I would simply say that we will work with the province of Manitoba, with the development projects to find a solution that will allow us to conserve and to ensure development. Thank you very much. It's now Mr. Watchhorn's speech for 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will share my time with the member for Victoria. I'd like to welcome my esteemed colleague here, also an engineer and a graduate from the Polytechnic School in Montreal, just like I am. That being said, conservation is very important for Quebec. Conservation of, across southern Quebec is important. We conserved 60 acres of a religious site, and we did that without subsidies from either government. We paid $2.1 million for 60 acres. In the weeks to come, there will be a great announcement for a protected site on the Mille-Île, a scout site on the Mille-Île, in the Mille-Île area. This is a partnership between various stakeholders. How can that kind of thank you for the question, which is very important and which concerns other aspects of the vision that we have. We hear a lot about 30 by 30 and our role on the world stage, such as what my colleague managed to achieve in his community or the community on the Rivière de Mille-Îles. There is an untold value for citizens because citizens are close to those sites and people want to be able to have access to nature. 80% of Canadians, more than 80% of Canadians, are interested in protecting nature. So those small-scale projects are absolutely fundamental. The structure that we gave to the strategy, A Force of Nature, lets us use different levers for leadership to be undertaken by people. The initiatives need to be supported by the state capacity at the state, provincial, or federal level, and also at the community level. And we eventually will get towards the third pillar, which is to mobilize capital and value nature, which will make us be able to achieve funds not only from the public funds, but also to go and get other funds. Those are examples of work that have great value, perhaps not in percentage of land, but in terms of the attachment by people. Do I still have time, Madam Speaker? Madam Chair, rather? When people undertake a project, they often work with real estate developers. That's exactly what we did. We protected a great amount of the ecological value of the land, but we also allowed developers to develop a certain part of their land so that there could be value to that property. How can we combine those two uses in the projects that will come in the context of this strategy? Thank you for your question, Madam Chair. That's an example where the private sector can develop a part of the land, and it's a small scale, but it's exactly what an example I would like to give to the previous colleague. You can identify where there would be the lowest risk on environment and on nature to be able to value that land while also permanently protecting nature where it is more fragile and where the ecological gain is more significant. That gives us the ability to move forward and to increase social acceptability of conservation.
Bon après-midi, et merci pour être ici, Madame. My question for you, Madam Secretary, has to do with how the government is going about the process of identifying new lands to meet the 30 by 30 target. And in particular, if I could ask, it is often the case that rural, remote, and northern parts of the country have more land available to conserve, but what measures are contained in this strategy to try to conserve lands closer to urban areas where more Canadians will be able to access them?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for your question. Madam Chair, that is a very tempting element. When you look at Canadian geography, you can say, oh, it's not complicated. There's not a lot of people up north, so let's protect up there and develop in the south. But as I said earlier, Canadians like nature. Canadians need access to nature, and their health depends on it as well. It's important to be able to find solutions in the south where there is higher population. So the restoration methods that exist will continue to be used because restoring degraded areas is an interesting strategy. What we're not often seeing, I'm from a rural riding. What's not often discussed is whether agricultural lands have the ecological factors to be able to conserve while maintaining productivity. I'm thinking about landscapes. There are other protections like forestry, and where colleagues from Alberta have examples where their pastures have a big impact on maintaining biodiversity. Those tools will be methods to develop conservation. Maybe not in the context of 30 to 30, but still to protect biodiversity. We will now turn to Mr. Bonnet. The floor is yours for 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we are so generous here at the Bloc Québécois, I will give my first minute to my colleague from Sandwich Gulf Islands. Thank you. It's once again the Green Party and the Bloc Québécois are working together. Thank you to my colleague. the chair.
Really clearly, so I don't trespass too much on the generosity. Look, when the nature strategy was first unveiled, how we were going to get to 30 by 30, which was 3 years ago, June 2024, a key part of it was the Nature Accountability Act. As we all know, Bill C-73 died on the order paper. I wonder if if the minister can update us on when we will see the Nature Accountability Act reintroduced into Parliament.
Merci beaucoup pour votre question, Madame.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Right now, we are not working on that right now. We are making sure we can create a team coordination to be able to implement the strategy that we have, a force of nature. There's been a lot of work that has been done, but it's been siloed, which means that concentration that we need to be able to reach our goals in 4 years, there have been gaps in that coordination. So we need to organize a structure to make sure that we can get there. We need to make sure that our coordination is efficient and that the tools are put in place to be able to implement the measures we need to implement, including capital mobilization. I will continue. Thank you for the answer. Thank you, dear colleague. Madam Secretary of State, I unfortunately missed the beginning of your speech, which I will look at later with pleasure. But I'm wondering, do you have a precise mandate letter that was given to you by the Prime Minister that determines what your priorities are and what your functions are? Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your question. This will allow me to answer. The first part of the answer is the mandate. Mr. Carney was very clear, not in writing, but in the throne speech, he was clear that the role I've been nominated and appointed to is to achieve the goal of 30 by 30. That's what he said to me. That's exactly what my mandate is. I worked at the beginning of the mandate with our colleague, Mr. Guilbeault. It was said to him, so it's very clear that that is the goal that I am here for. You have a mandate letter, do you? It's not a letter. It's exactly the goal that was written and that was mentioned in the throne speech. It's very powerful. Would you like me to answer the next part of your question, which was, it was my mandate as Secretary of State. Oh, sure. Okay. Well, if you'd give me a second, I will just explain, like I said in the speech that you weren't able to hear earlier, is that my role is almost like that of a project manager. Ministers have a very wide-reaching and complicated mandate, but I was explaining to Ms. May, or rather the colleague earlier, the work that has been done in the context of the nature strategy was somewhat siloed. So the point of designating the Secretary of State is to coordinate those various actions. Thank you. I'm interested in the financing. There's a funding of $3.8 billion. British Columbia received $500 million. Quebec got $100 million in their context for nature protection. The Minister of the Environment said that there were $400 million available in addition for Quebec, but we never saw that money. So is that money still available? Or rather, $460 million. Is that money still available? Thank you for your question, Madam Chair. The budgetary structure of the previous government is not the same structure as the current government. Okay, thank you. In your $3.8 billion over the course of the next 3 years, do you think you'll be able to meet the goal of 30% by 2030? $3.8 billion over 5 years. Okay, so enough to get us to 2030. Will we get to 2030? Yes. But if we read the strategy, you can see that the intention is to liberate or unleash private capital that is often controlled by philanthropic organizations. But there's also money that companies might have that could be available for nature. So in the context of my answer, we would like to maintain the government's leadership. The results that we have achieved today are a result of 80% of public finances. It's incredible, but we are not in a financial context where we would be able to continue between now and 2030. So the goal is to use pillars 2 and 3 to increase the overall sums. So in 2024, there were 210 pages, and this, I think, report is 15 pages. There were 23 targets with indicators for each target. So are you continuing with those targets, or will there be updates? The Kunming-Montreal deal is a deal that is still, Canada is still ratified. My colleagues will be able to give you more updates on those 23 goals.
Anstey for 5 minutes.
And thank you to the witnesses for appearing today. I had a couple of questions specific to the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, where we are really hoping for natural resource development in the future as we, experience decline, especially in our rural and remote communities. I'm curious about what consultations specifically that you've done in the natural resource sector, as well as with municipalities in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador as you prepared for this strategy.
Merci.
Thank you for the question. Consultations on the strategy were done when the strategy for 2030 was developed. What we put in this current strategy is the implementation strategy. So there was not a consultation on the implementation. When we will complete the conservation in the colleagues' province, we will do what we have done everywhere, which is that we will work with the province, with actors in the area, and we will look for solutions that give us the ability to reach our economic goals and our conservation goals.
The Newfoundland and Labrador provincial government withdrew support for a proposed South Coast Fjords National Marine Conservation Area because they felt that it threatened some opportunities in the fishing and mining sector. So with this strategy, does the federal government respect the province's position to not want to enter into these agreements?
We can't impose conservation on provinces. Provinces are responsible for 76% of land. They have responsibilities recognized by the Constitution. So our goal here is not to impose anything. It's to find strategies for sustainability, considering the fact that Canadians want to protect nature. They like nature. They tell us it's recognized. Parks Canada, for example, is an emblematic symbol around the world, but especially for Canadians, it unites us. So the strategies we want to adopt, maybe the first approach was not one that was approved or preferred by the Newfoundland government, but we have other strategies that will make it so that we are able to implement conservation while also allowing for the development of projects. That's why we want to build Canada well.
Go through another round of consultations and they still take the same position. Will their decision be respected?
Merci.
Thank you. It is not possible to not respect the decisions of a province. The land is under that province's responsibility.
And just to expand on that just a little bit deeper, when this decision was made by the provincial government, the FFAW also came out and were very supportive of that decision. And they said that the decision shows respect for fish harvesters and recognizes the real economic harm that this proposal posed to adjacent communities. Their position was that the proposed NMCA threatened the owner-operator fishery while offering no evidence that it would achieve meaningful outcomes, conservation outcomes, and saying that further restrictions would undermine the livelihoods of the fish harvesters in that area. So I'm curious, when you're looking at all of these strategies, are these the sorts of things that you keep in mind, and these livelihoods will be protected as you roll these measures out?
J'ai juste une question de compréhension.
I have a question of comprehension. FFAW is, Food, Fisheries, Allied Workers. Okay. Thank you for your question. I understand that I have to quickly answer. All marine conservation efforts are done in the capacity of long-term maintenance of fisheries. It's not a question of banning fishing activities.
Resources. Et en ce moment, ce qu'on voit,
what we see right now is that there are some aspects where, unfortunately, given lack of protection, it's unsure if we'll be able to have protections of that resource in the long term. So that's why we continue to think that even for Newfoundland and Labrador, there are excellent opportunities that will maintain fishing capacity in Newfoundland and Labrador.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you. Je ne parle pas français.
I don't speak French very well.
English. Désolé. Secretary Provost, as you are aware, it's important to recognize the Great Lakes as both an environmental and economic asset for the communities across Canada, and most notably today as it's Great Lakes Day on the Hill. Through the Federal Nature Strategy and the National Water Security Strategy, the government has identified freshwater restoration, nutrient reduction, and biodiversity recovery as key priorities. In my riding, the Bay of Quinte, where local communities have long shown strong leadership on water quality and shoreline stewardship along Lake Ontario, how will the government build on that work to deliver measurable progress, and how will communities be able to track those results?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for the question.
Mr. Fanjoy, sorry, yes, Madam Chair.
Merci beaucoup pour la.
Thank you very much for the question. The question on freshwater protection in Canada is a real worrying subject for all of us, something that we're all worried about. So in the context of the strategy, there will be an aspect that will cover the national strategy on water protection to be able to answer people's concerns who want to make sure that, well, I'll go back a little bit. In Canada, we are all convinced that water is an infinite resource. I say all, but more and more as I go around Canada, I realize that some provinces have known for a long time that water is a rare and precious resource. I come from a place where we thought water was infinite, and unfortunately, we're not always using it sustainably. But I think that people's consciousness is rising, so I think that's why we will support the national strategy with the Canadian Water Agency to be able to offer to Canadians today, tomorrow, and in the future high-quality water for our survival.
Madam Secretary of State, I love win-win solutions, and Canada's strategy to protect nature is one of those. Can you elaborate on the important role of Indigenous communities in the development of this strategy?
Thank you very much for the question. Indigenous peoples represent us over large lands. They conserve nature, they know how to do it, and they have shown. I'll give an example of a project that wasn't initiated by our government at all. It was initiated by the Harper government, which is the Great Bear Rainforest. This funding project with Indigenous peoples in British Columbia showed not only the great capacity that nature conservation offers, but it showed its economic profitability that can be based on economic development initiated by First Nations. And it's a wonderful example of reconciliation between our nations. Since then, there have been other projects. The Great Bear Sea project. There's a project in Manitoba. There's a project in Nunavut. There are other projects that are being discussed. Those big projects will allow us to not only protect very vast spaces of land and water, but that will also allow us to accelerate our reconciliation as we develop the economy in communities where that has been very difficult historically.
And a quick question for Madame Levesque. How can economic development align with nature protection goals?
Thank you very much for the question. In fact, the two can go hand in hand, and the second pillar of the strategy, Building Canada Well, it's very much designed with that in mind. We have a variety of regulatory and legislative frameworks that the members would be well familiar with here, but it's how we actually apply and deploy these tools. So if you're looking at a project of national interest or a project of high local interest that may not be at a national scale, it's how we interpret, whether it's through regional assessments at the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, the Fish and Fish Habitat Protection Program at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the regulations that underpin the Species at Risk Act, how we actually work with developers, with the communities, with First Nations, where these will be built, to apply the mitigation hierarchy, where we look to avoid, we look to minimize the damage, mitigate, and offset, so that we can actually have not only projects existing in a natural setting, but in some cases offsets that build back better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fanjoy. Maintenant, je passe la parole à Mr.
And now, Mr. Benet will have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary of State, I was talking about the fact that British Columbia received $500 million for a tripartite agreement on nature, whereas Quebec only received $100 million. $500 million for BC, $100 million for Quebec. I'm wondering if you can give us, maybe not today, but at some point give us a presentation of the money that has been allocated. How much went to each province? Would you be able to depose a document like that? Maybe also one that we could see where that money ended up going. I also have questions on the $3.8 billion announced in the context of the nature strategy. Will there be funds that will go directly to Quebec, to the government of Quebec? Thank you for your question. The money that was defined in the nature strategy was in the context of the previous budgetary framework. I'm sure my colleagues will be able to give you the information that you're looking for. When it comes to the strategy right now, the detailed breakdown of how the money will work is not yet decided, but there is a framework for working with actors in the area to mobilize capital. So you were not unable to say if money will go to Quebec, but you can give us a more detailed breakdown of where that $3.8 billion will end up going. It's rather vast, so if you had something that were a bit more detailed, it would be appreciated. I'll get back on the nature strategy of 2024. There were 23 targets with indicators. I'm wondering if you could present at this committee a document on the state of the advancement of those targets. Do you also have a detailed list of different projects on land or water conservation? What are the projects that are already in place, and where are they? A quick answer, please. We will consider all the requests from the colleague, and we will submit to him the information he's looking for. Thank you very much, Mr. Bonnet.
60 for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome everyone to our committee today. The 800,000 square kilometers is an ambitious target, and you've described a few scenarios and some direction on what the plan is. And it'd be very easy to add that much land in the Arctic archipelago without affecting very many people. But you're inferring that a lot of this is going to be done in the southern belt, where there's a lot of people. In the lower part of the country, right, where the people are, so the people can have access. Our population density is in the big cities and urban areas, and so they'll be adjacent. So I'm wondering, specifically more to Alberta, how many potential sites have been already identified for inclusion in this plan?
Merci pour votre...
Thank you for your question. There are sites, and the list will be presented to the committee clearer. The question was raised by Mr. Bonnet. The sites will be formally deposed at the study stage. There is a series of sites where the definition is between the hands of either private landowners who are working right now with nature protection groups and conservation groups. And as a government, we are not the first leaders on those. We provide funding, but philanthropic and conservation groups, and NCC Canora Limité, for example, they will put forward the request.
So is the point to enable access, or is the point to protect it?
Je pense qu'on doit faire... Merci pour...
Thank you for the question. We have to keep in mind the fact that we want to give access to nature, but in terms of proportions, they are limited because maybe the land is developed or private. But obviously, we have to consider those factors. That's why we keep working in the, for example, urban parks. If we really want to get 30 by 30, we have to work on big spaces and also take in mind the needs for economic development.
The types of parcels you want in the places that you want, are you going to consider expropriation of land as well? Not at all? Not, you can assure...
Madame la Présidente, ce n'est pas...
Madam Speaker, this is not an expropriation strategy. As we said in the past, we want to continue in the future, and these are projects that are implemented in collaboration with territories, provinces, municipalities, developers, communities. They will be the ones who will help us and guide us. There are already projects on the table that are known, and there are other projects that are in the hands of NGOs who work in conservation.
Or landowners have a veto on anything that you might propose?
Parce que je comprends dans le 15...
Thank you for your question. In what has already been accomplished, it was done in collaboration. Collaboration and partnership is at the heart of this strategy. There are examples, for example, in rural Quebec.
Short, you can assure the committee today there will be no compulsion to participate on private land.
Jusqu'à présent...
As of now, there has not been any. Thank you, Madam Chair. As of now, there's not been any, so I don't believe that it is written anywhere that we were going to change our approach in that way. Canadians like nature, businesses like nature, so we consider that they will contribute where they can to achieve 30 by 30.
Have you conducted a comprehensive economic risk assessment of removing lands from the public, from private, like including lands in this scheme, and what is the economic impact of that, positive or negative, and negative?
Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for your question. Madam Chair, as I said a few minutes ago, there is no obligation. There's no scheme. We're in discussion. The economic impact of conservation is clear. We need air, we need drinking water to be able to live. So the economic impact of conservation has been measured.
If you're removing arable land out of production to make conservation spaces, there's going to be an economic impact, whether it's willing or not. And we
Mr.
need to know
Bexley,
what
I'm
that
afraid
is.
your time is up.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Can you table that with
Et
the
finalement, on
committee?
tourne à Monsieur Saint-Pierre.
And finally, Mr. St. Pierre for 5 minutes. Thank you to my dear colleague for being here today, and thank you for your incredible work. Please continue. The third pillar of the strategy explains the importance of mobilizing private capital, but also using innovative financial tools to finance conservation in the long term. Can you give a few examples of those innovative financing tools? Thank you very much for the question. In Canada and around the world, when it comes to sustainable finance, there already are examples. Everything from the carbon tax to other tools gave us the ability to finance the fight against climate change. In the context of nature as is, there are projects. For example, in Australia, there are forestry projects that have shown the capacity in large international financial spaces to valorize nature and to implement private capital while also protecting biodiversity. There are examples like that we want to import it into Canada, because right now we use 80% of public funding for conservation, and we will not be able to reach our goals if we can't transform that funding model. It's a big challenge, but I think Canada can be a leader, and private organizations need to bear some of that responsibility. It's not a responsibility that should only fall on the shoulders of individuals and states. It's a responsibility that should be shared because we all use nature. Everyone needs water, everyone needs air, quality air, and nature conservation is a means to protect the vast natural capital we have in Canada. We are privileged, we have extraordinary resources, but we need to be able to take the responsibility off of only the public shoulders. We have to widen the brunt of responsibility, and there need to be mechanisms that allow us to use those things there. In Banff, I was at a nature summit. The enthusiasm was wonderful. There were people from all over the world, from Europe and from the United Nations. They want to support this because it's the only way that we can meet our big goals. The work we've been doing has been extraordinary, but the next step is even more, is also important. And that will achieve the goals of the third pillar and also the task force that we'll put in place. Thank you. I also share your enthusiasm with the financing mechanisms and mechanisms for private financing. There are groups that are working very hard right now. Could you tell us why the government is implementing an expert task force? Could you explain that? Thank you for your question. Yes, there's a challenging paradigm here because there are international agreements that define some of this. So when we aim to get experts who work in the field, we will be able to go faster and come up with proposals that work for our government. So if we're able to use expertise from elsewhere, this will give us an international reach as a leader in nature financing. I believe that will be good for us. Maybe one final question. financial or philanthropic organizations and ecological groups are mentioned a lot in this report. Could you maybe give a few examples of those groups and provide some documentation? Yes, this will bring me pleasure. Thank you for your question. Madam Chair, with the teams that are here, we'll make sure that we share some names. I named a few: Canara Limited, Canadian Nature Conservation Organizations, Indigenous Leadership. There are large Indigenous groups behind some of these projects are also anxious to continue this collaboration. So at the moment, we're working very well with them, and we need to continue our work with those groups. We need to continue moving forward, but I think we can keep building a Canada strong with a strong nature. Thank you very much, Mr. St. Pierre.
Secretary of State, but we did begin late and we have 10 minutes technically remaining. So I will put it to the committee whether we would like to catch up our time, finish off this round and move on to round 2, or if we would like to maybe have one more question per party for Madame Provost. One more question from Madame Provost. Okay, so I propose we do, let's see, 3 minutes per party. 3 minutes per party, and then we will close out round 2. Ça va bien? Okay, so we will begin with the Conservative Party. Is it Mr. Leslie? For 3 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What share of the $3.8 billion allocated to this will be going directly to on-the-ground habitat work, and what share is expected to go to administration of programs, consultants, mapping, advisory bodies, conferences, and other things that don't do anything for the environment?
Merci beaucoup pour votre question.
Thank you very much for your question. Unfortunately, at this stage, I'm not in a position to give you an answer. No doubt the team of officials will be able to give you information based on what we have now, but we are also currently establishing our implementation coordination strategy, so perhaps the first answer won't be there for you, but we'll be happy to give you any information that we have and then give you supplementary information thereafter.
Continue to share with this committee what that looks like as it develops. Now, my question is, again, hopefully there'll be some certainty. Will local groups be able to access federal conservation money through simple forms and fast approvals and ideally sweat equity, meaning that groups, the people that actually do things, they put hip waders on, they go and create cold water refuge to create fish habitat that don't have money. Instead of just giving it to a bunch of these big organizations that don't actually do anything, are you going to give it to the people on the ground that will actually make the environment a better place to live, work, and play on?
J'adore votre question. Merci beaucoup.
I absolutely love your question. Thank you very much for it. Through you, Madam Chair. The spirit through which we're working, where we're trying to work with nature, is clearly there because we believe that what people already do should be fostered already. You have no doubt noted my enthusiasm when MP Watchhorn, if I can name him, asked us if we talked about the examples in his community. These are clearly projects that are of very high value for Canadians. So yes, we want to ensure that we find the right strategies to be able to support this kind of initiative, and this rapidly and simply.
Thank you. And I'm going to try to combine two questions into one here. I'm not sure if you're familiar with previous programs, namely the Recreational Fisheries Conservation Partnership Program that was ended by the Liberal government, which trusted local angling groups to restore fish habitat, remove barriers, improve water quality. I'm curious why that program hasn't been reestablished, whether it could be folded underneath this, as well as whether or not there's consideration for a national ecological goods and services program that will actually pay farmers and landowners for doing real conservation work on their private property.
Je n'aurai pas une réponse complète à...
I don't have a full answer right now to provide through you, Madam Chair. But certainly we'll have to study this further, and we'll give you the information with what we have in hand. Just like we want to work with groups in the field, we also want to work with biodiversity conservation efforts, even in a context where the ground is laboured. So there are no doubt possibilities and my colleagues will be able to give you a bit more information.
Now turn to Mr. Millet for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Secretary Provost, I've been working closely over the last year with land trusts in my area. The Bay of Quinte, there's several active groups, and I've been speaking with the national organization as well. Can you expand a little bit on how land trusts would become a crucial component of this plan for 30 after 30? And will there be any more incentives for land trusts to perhaps attract more people to take part in donating to land trusts?
Merci beaucoup pour votre question.
Thank you very much for the question. What you mention is that there are land trusts now, landowners, individuals who know the natural value of their lands and who want to protect it in the long term. It is therefore eminently clear that these groups are essential pillars with which we will like to work for the 30 after 30. Some programs are still being developed and will allow us to leverage these efforts with the capital that will be unlocked. We are still in development of these initiatives, and no doubt my colleagues will be able to give you some details, but these clearly are conservation strategies that are of huge value in our new strategy.
How am I looking? One more quick. Well, you mentioned some of your colleagues. Could any of your colleagues explain, is that in consideration, any sort of enhanced tax breaks, say, for people who do participate in land trusts?
Thank you for the question. So no additional tax breaks in underway at the moment. We do work closely with the various land trusts, and we are looking at how to work best with them to unlock greater recognition across the working landscapes, because land trusts do work both in pure protected areas, but they also work with partners who, say, are involved in agricultural activities. And so that's the kind of thing that we'd like to be able to focus on in our active conversation.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Millet. And maintenant, je tourne à Monsieur Bonin pour...
Mr. Bonin, 3 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary of State, you have quite the challenge ahead of you, and we will collaborate in a constructive way, obviously. But let's be realistic. In the last few billions that were announced, you completely missed the 2025 conservation targets of 25%, and the results was a mere 15%. You're putting a little bit of money, you're giving yourselves 3 years. Given past performances, it's difficult to see how you'll reach your objective. You're saying that there's $460 million for Quebec under the former minister, but you now mentioned that the government has withdrawn this amount, which is concerning. Do you have a match plan that you could tell us where we will be in 2027, in 28, in 29, and 2030? I imagine that you have a breakdown in that respect. If we want to reach a destination, we generally need a map to get there in the first place. Thank you for that question. The strategy was launched but 1 month ago. The project's office is beginning to work on the structure this week. The second we have a bit more clarity on how we'll progress towards 2030, we'll be happy to publish it. And that would be when? Asks MP Bonin. I could be able to tell you after the first meeting. Could you give us an update annually with documents? Answer, I'd love nothing more. You've talked about astronomical figures. I would like the private sector to invest and protect forests, for example. I'm a bit skeptical because you have a huge objective of 30%. Will you be investing more in protecting public lands where we have to protect, as opposed to where private money can be used to invest in protecting private lands? through you, Madam Chair. The question was raised by your colleagues on public land. 76% of these lands are provincial lands. Canada simply can't just come stomping in saying, well, it's important to save nature. But it's the provinces that will decide what to do with their lands. Public land is important, and they must be protected, but we need to work with provinces and territories in collaboration with First Nations as well, taking into account the major projects that are needed. Of course, there will be collective discussions on the matter in order to reach our objectives. How will you reconcile pipelines going through lands, for example? How will you protect lands when the projects can supersede protection? Well, unfortunately, the time is up.
So that concludes our time. Un grand merci à Madame Provost.
A big thank you, Ms. Provost, for having been with us for an hour.
And honestly, thank you, Minister, Secretary. I'm not exactly sure what to call you, but thank you for your answers today. I just want to make sure to follow up. You mentioned several times that departmental officials would follow up, so I'm just hoping that we can get, for all those individual occasions, that we can have the department share stuff. Thank you very much.
Project manager.
Okay.
Yes, and thank you very much also to the officials for your time. We're going to suspend briefly so that we can switch to our second round. Thank you. Welcoming witnesses from Parks Canada Agency this afternoon. Again, we have Andrew Campbell, the interim president and CEO. We have Patrick Boucher, Vice President, Real Property and Assets. Welcome. Andrew Francis, Vice President, Finance and Chief Financial Officer. Welcome, Andrew. And David Miller, Vice President, Protected Areas Establishment and Conservation. And Nadine Spence, Vice President, Indigenous Stewardship and Cultural Heritage. Thank you all very much for being here. We're going to begin with 5 minutes from Mr. Campbell. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with the members of the committee to present the plans and priorities of Parks Canada for 2026-2027. I will start by recognizing that we are gathered on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I will start by enumerating some of the ways with which Parks Canada has supported Canadians over the last year.
Free admission to national historic sites, national parks, and national conservation areas administered by Parks Canada through the Canada Strong Pass. Canadians enthusiastically embrace this opportunity to access affordable and meaningful experiences at iconic cultural and natural heritage sites across our country. Preliminary figures indicate that Parks Canada welcomed approximately 26 million visitors last year, an increase of 13% over 2024. This was the second highest level of visitation ever, surpassed only in 2017, when free admission encouraged 27 million visits to Parks Canada administered places as part of the Canada 150 celebrations. This level of visitation underscores the growing importance of Parks Canada places as destinations Canadians cherish, and also as engines of economic activity. As Canada's largest tourism provider, visitation to Parks Canada administered places contributed an estimated $4 billion to Canada's GDP in communities across the country. With the renewal of the Canada Strong Pass, Parks Canada looks forward to welcoming Canadians again this summer with free admission and a 25% discount on camping fees. I will now turn to Parks Canada's plans and priorities for 2026-27, which are aligned with the Government of Canada's March 31st announcement regarding A Force of Nature, Canada's vision for protecting nature. This strategy, as the Secretary of State had indicated, includes an investment of $3.8 billion over the next 5 years and $48 million ongoing to accelerate Canada's progress towards protecting 30% of lands and waters in Canada by 2030, restoring critical habitats, strengthening ocean resilience, and mobilizing new investments in nature. Protecting nature is essential for biodiversity and climate resilience. It's also a smart and strategic economic investment. Parks Canada's administered places support roughly 40,000 jobs, $2.4 billion in labor income, and $584 million in tax revenue for various levels of government. These economic benefits are especially important for rural, remote, northern, and Indigenous communities, where nature-based tourism and conservation jobs provide stable employment and help diversify local economies. Parks Canada
will continue protecting nature this year by advancing negotiations with Indigenous partners as well as with provincial and territorial governments to establish new protected areas. Parks Canada will continue working toward the designation of new national urban parks across the country to establish a network of accessible green spaces for Canadians in Canada's urban centres, including Windsor, Saskatoon, and Victoria.
Conservation, Parks Canada will contribute to the recovery of species at risk. Work in 2026-27 will focus on maintaining ecological integrity through climate-informed planning, species at risk recovery actions, and collaborative restoration projects that integrate Indigenous knowledge. Parks Canada will also continue to implement its Indigenous stewardship policy, developed in collaboration with the agency's Indigenous Stewardship Circle. The policy guides our approach to the governance of protected areas, respecting Indigenous stewardship for lands, waters, and ice, both now and into the future. This year, Parks Canada will invest in built heritage assets, prioritizing the most urgent repairs, maintenance, and safety needs across the places it administers. These investments are made possible by the $545.1 million in temporary funding provided in Budget 2024. Parks Canada will also continue to broaden the stories that are told about Canada's history. In collaboration with partners, we will promote the nomination of new historical subjects that reflect the diversity of Canada and communities. Parks Canada administered places connect Canadians through powerful stories and iconic landscapes. Fostering a shared sense of belonging. They're also vital public assets that support healthy communities, resilient ecosystems, and a strong, inclusive economy. Thank you. J'aimerais bien accueillir des questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Okay, we'll begin with our questions from committee members with Mr. Ross for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it seems part of the mandate for Parks Canada is to expand and establish new protected areas and improve connectivity to contribute to Canada's 30% conservation target by 2030. Now, I have experience in this area, as we did set aside lands for conservation back when I was chief in council for my small band, but it was a very unlevel playing field. We wanted to conserve land, of course, for sensitive areas, but money was an incentive because we didn't have any. We didn't have any money, and there's a lot of First Nations in Canada that experience the same thing. And that shouldn't be a glaring incentive, especially when we see that 30 by 30 is a permanent decision. You can't undo it. And like us, you couldn't even get an exemption. So in terms of the expansion of 30 by 30 and the expansion of Parks Canada, what are the measures to ensure that it's a level playing field for First Nations that don't have the resources otherwise?
It's an excellent question, and I'll start by answering and then turn it to my colleague Nadine Spence to also talk a little bit more about the...
Your answer will suffice.
Great. The primary piece that happens through when we are doing the establishment process is meeting with local communities and ensuring that there is capacity funding for local communities.
Very familiar with the process. I want to know how you level a playing field without making money a primary incentive.
So again, I will start that Madam Chair, with the fact that we start the establishment process by ensuring that there is capacity funding for First Nations, for Métis, and for Inuit organizations that are where the area is coming. In many cases today, we have those communities coming to us, and then we sit down and we look at what the capacity funding that they have in order to make sure that...
Maybe I can be more clear on my experience. I get the capacity funding, but really what it was forwarding money to us for the long term to protect land, but it was in two pots. One was a finite pot for economic development that we spent, and the other one was ongoing funding for environmental management from our office. But that actually sterilized the land forever. And we tried to go back for exemptions, and we couldn't get it. So we're effectively tying the hands of future Indigenous leaders. And to go back to my point, I thought it was very unfair to use that for a band that had no, like, don't get me wrong, we got lots of money now. We got forestry money, LNG money. That is not an issue for us now. But when we look back on some of those lands that we protected, we can't undo it. So in my eyes, what I'm seeing now is the same formula being used that will tie the hands of future First Nations leaders who might have not see the inventory of opportunities on the land base. And I'm talking about energy, mining, forestry, because the governments and the NGOs and the nonprofits came to us and they promised us the moon on tourism opportunities, and none of them are materialized. In fact, they all left. They took the money, they got them from the federal government, the provincial government. They opened up big offices in San Francisco and Vancouver, and we got nothing. We had, in fact, all we got from the provincial government was $15,000 a year to manage protected areas. So that example is living right there right now under the Coast Opportunity Funds in BC. Is there any appetite for the government to ensure that this process doesn't happen again?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Parks Canada Indigenous Stewardship Policy is the piece that ensures that happens, which ensures co-governance and movement towards governance of protected areas that are under Parks Canada.
And that includes the possibility to exempt or to amend those protected areas in the future?
So certainly within all of the national parks, although the permanents are, or although there is permanent protection, there is always a way through co-governance of looking at what opportunities are there within that protected area to continue to co-govern with the Government of Canada.
Thank you. And you can get back to me on this next question. Overlap issues in BC is a mess. It is absolute chaos. And it's got to do with the treaty negotiations that are going on. It's got to do with TRIPA. It's got to do with all sorts of different issues happening at the same time. In fact, First Nations in BC are saying that they will block the highway to Prince Rupert if their overlap issues are not addressed within the BC treaty process. So my question to you is and you can get back to me in writing to the committee, if you please, on how you will ensure that this is an open, transparent process with all the First Nations affected by overlap issues when you plan to expand 30 by 30 initiatives in BC. Madam Chair, I'm tabling this motion that I will move at a future meeting, and I'd like to read it into the record with my remaining time. That the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development undertake a study pursuant to Standing Order 1082 of at least 2 meetings on the environmental and economic impacts of tire recycling and retreading in Canada, with particular attention to low-cost single-use tire imports. Examine their effects on domestic manufacturing, retreading, circular economy goals, and waste diversion, considering implications for jobs, competitiveness, and supply chain resilience, and report its findings and recommendations to the House.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ross. And we will now turn to Mr. Watchorn for 6 minutes.
Mr. Millett.
Yeah.
Mr. Millett, my apologies.
We're a little out of order. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will be sharing my time with my colleague, Mr. Fanjoy. Thank you. My question, I guess, is directed to Mr. Campbell and possibly more directly to Mr. Miller, owing to your purview. I understand that Parks Canada has committed multiple years of support to studying the feasibility of eradicating such invasive species as water soldier, in particular from part of the Trent Severn waterway that is under active management. And just for a little clarity, this is in my riding of the Bay of Quinte. So it's commendable work, of course, and but my one concern is that this work seems to be tightly restricted in areas explicitly within the parameters of the Trent Severn itself. As some here know, prolific invasive species such as water soldier don't respect jurisdictional lines on a map. So my question is, how is Parks Canada, as an agency, protecting its important investment in dealing with invasives like water soldier, where both federal and provincial authorities must be part of the solution? So are Parks Canada, the Trent Severn Waterway, other agencies or departments ensuring that collaborative solutions, are being supported to drive results on the water in cases such as this, where we have, because the water soldier issue emanating from the Trent Severn into it could eventually wind up at Thousand Islands, for instance, if it gets out of the bay. So it's a big issue.
So I will not take any extra of your time, and I will turn it directly to Mr. Miller.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Like you said, invasive species don't respect jurisdictional boundaries, and so while we take action on our own lands to try and remove invasive species, control them, monitor for them, we do also, as you've alluded to, try to coordinate as much as possible with provincial agencies, conservation authorities, adjacent landowners to have, sort of joint and collective approaches wherever we can. We do it with a range of different types of invasive species. As much as possible, we try to have sort of regionalized plans to say, where might this spread from to, and to have common approaches. And so it is certainly, like you said, an area where collaboration is important and where we work as closely as we can with our colleagues in neighboring jurisdictions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Miller, and I appreciate that, because this really is a very urgent all hands on deck, and we do have buy-in from the province of Ontario right now. The Quinte Conservation, for instance, is the federal government has provided funding for students through student summer jobs for a good number of students to actually be on the water trying to mitigate this. The threat is real, and I guess I don't really have to outline that to you, but I appreciate the fact that there is a commitment to collaboration on this. Thank you. And I'll, again, share my time.
Thank you. I was very encouraged to hear about urban parks. We currently have one official urban park in Canada. How would municipalities go about putting together proposals for Parks Canada for future urban parks?
Yeah, thanks. An excellent question. And right now we have 6 national urban parks under study across the country. So the first couple of the first steps are obviously with the municipality working with any rights holders, First Nations, Métis, that they have, and then working with the province. We are trying to, at the moment, make sure that these are spread across the country. So that is a big piece of how we are looking right now. And at current, we are working, as I said, with the 6 that we have in front of us.
Okay, thank you. In my riding of Carleton, we're fortunate to have the Rideau Canal National Historic Site, and we're updating some of the infrastructure and assets along that treasured park. Can you update me on that project?
Yeah, certainly we have a number of projects, and I will turn it to my colleague, Mr. Boucher, to give you a further update.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. Budget 2024 provided Parks Canada $545.1 million specifically to support investments on capital assets in Canada's national parks, in our marine conservation areas and national historic sites. And this funding has really allowed Parks Canada to strategically undertake priority time-sensitive capital investments and repairs across its portfolio of assets. Primarily, the focus has really been on assets of highest risk, and obviously the waterways is an important asset that Parks Canada is a custodian of. So we regularly prioritize from a risk-based approach to make sure that we're addressing the infrastructure needs of its portfolio. So it's a very complex portfolio, as you can imagine. Replacement value of the overall portfolio is roughly $32.8 billion. So we do take that risk-based approach, prioritizing certain projects such as the one that you've referred to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Franjoy. Et maintenant, je passe la parole.
And now the floor is to Monsieur Bonin for 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to get back to the Canada Strong Pass. Quebec requested compensation for that program. It said it was informed 2 weeks before the holidays that this was done too quickly. Will Quebec get a compensation for choosing to not participate in what they saw as an intrusion by the federal government? I don't have the information specifically on Canada Strong Pass. It would be better to ask my colleagues at Heritage Canada. But for Parks Canada, we started before this period so that Quebecers can have their national holiday in national parks. Could you give me the numbers as to how much it cost for 2025? I understand it's coming back in 2026 to pass. Yes, maybe Mr. Francis can answer. Yes, last summer,
the agency within our supplementary estimates last year for that diminished revenue. For the summer, it was $72.5 million. That was for the free accommodation, plus there was a 25% reduction on camping fees. So that amount was to cover off our reduced revenue there. Canada Strong was extended, I'll call it the holiday Christmas period, in December, early January, and we were compensated for $10.9 million of lost revenue during that season.
And the $76 million, more or less, will you present a document about how that money is spent across Canada? When I go to the United States and I go to a national park, I am Canadian, and they say, oh, you're Canadian, you will pay more than Americans. I'm trying to understand the logic behind that. Why would we give free access? I understand that's what's happening. Free access for people coming from elsewhere to Canada. Can you explain that? It's something that we're studying right now to determine if it were possible to have something like that. But right now, it's the organization Destination Canada that gave the advice that it would be better to have that reduction for everybody. And so that's a policy of the Canadian government. So it's not you. You have nothing to do with this. You have no opinion on whether it's a good or bad idea? No, I have no opinion. Are there any documents that exist about the economic analysis on this? And do we know how many tourists and people from abroad benefit from this pass in our parks? It's hard to determine exactly in parks because everything is open right now, so there are no numbers. So you don't know exactly how much we are giving to foreigners and tourists for coming here. Not in the context of this Canada Strong program. You say there's an economic analysis that was undertaken. Will that be presented? Yes, when we will finish the study, it will be possible to present here. but you have no statistics at Parks Canada on what percentage of people are coming from Canada or from abroad. Yes, but not in the past period. Well, I imagine you have the figures relatively recently. Could you present or table that information? I don't. So I have a misunderstanding about your role. Do you have a role to play in the 30 after 30 initiative? Yes, we have a certain initiative and a target to be an organization that gives a bit more to reach that goal for the government in general. What is the percentage that you have? For land, up to 3%, and for marine land, up to 6%. I understand. That's Parks Canada. So that's in your 2026, 2027 plan. Do you have a plan that you could present up until 2030? Yes, we have a plan for every year. And for the different negotiations, yes, we have a plan up until 2030. Yes. Could you table it? Yes. Yes. Okay. I'd like to understand, I'm trying to understand, in the Montreal area, for example, there are former golf courses that will be converted into natural spaces. The Montreal metropolitan community wants $100 million to help get there. I'm trying to understand what is the benefit to the federal government coming to manage urban parks versus having the municipalities or the Quebec government who also have expertise handling it instead. Why not just send money to municipalities and provinces? A short answer, please. So the model for urban parks is to have different levels of governments who work together and to have their own lands in urban parks. So the strategy is to have a collaboration between different levels of government. And you are right with the fact that it's better to have different levels of government. Thank you very much, Mr. Bonnet.
Leslie for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recognizing I think this is our second and last round for the hour, I'm hoping that we could submit a few questions for you to answer back to us in writing, Mr. Campbell. Is that okay?
I think we
Perfect,
can do
thank you.
that.
I was going to ask one question and hand it over to Mr. Stevenson. Now, the government obviously is talking about 10 new parks as part of the nature strategy, and we all recognize when we go to parks, as beautiful they are, they have very much aging infrastructure in many different facets. I'm sure this has been brought to light to the government. That in some places it's crumbling infrastructure. So my concern is, how do we trust Parks Canada with the existing budget to manage more land, 10 new parks, while struggling to maintain and enhance what it already has? And what is that budgetary ask on behalf of Parks Canada to achieve that objective? And is that part of the $3.8 billion allocated in the announcement?
So it is not part of the $3.8 billion as part of the announcement. There is no, there's very limited, sorry, I shouldn't say no, very limited asset dollars within that 3.8 billion. We continue to, we can certainly share with the committee studies that we have done, saying what you know our annual deficit is for asset repair and maintenance. Happy to do so.
Remaining time to Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you. Thank you for this is my first time to the Environment Committee. I'm going to brag. I have absolutely the most beautiful riding in the country with Yellowhead, with Banff and Jasper, both taking up a good chunk of my riding. The first question I'm going to have, and it may not to be Mr. Campbell after hearing it, but the first question I have is specifically, and actually all my questions are regarding Jasper with the wildfires that we had in the past over in 2024. The first one specifically, the Grand Yellowhead Public School Division has had multiple correspondence with the Minister of Environment and Climate Change regarding that 24 wildfires, and both indicated that it had not yet received any formal response with the request about reimbursement with the $500,000 insurance deductible incurred from the wildfire contamination. Are you aware of this request? Or that might be...
Yes.
Okay. So you are aware of it, and can you tell us when they might actually get a response to that? Because they have yet not gotten one.
So I'm not sure with whom you have been discussing, but we are, I think, as well, happy to share our response that we sent back to them with you if you would like that.
Okay. I guess maybe I'm a week or two out from your responses, and that's fine. Because I want to make sure that we actually get back to those guys, because in regards to my next question, I had a question with regards to the Minister of Environment about, and they said there was $187 million that was allocated for critical infrastructure, and yet only 44.6 was been spent. So I'm hoping that would fit into this critical infrastructure. But can you explain why the progress on the core infrastructure rebuilding has been lagging, and why they have the key infrastructure when it actually being completed and they'll be spending more?
So a large piece of the infrastructure is in housing and temporary housing. So the temporary housing, there's probably somebody here with their binders that can tell you, but it is over 600 spots that we have created from a temporary housing perspective. From most of the other projects, the first year and a half of those projects, and we are on schedule with those projects, was actually doing the design and engineering that was required, as well as the cleanup. So from those perspectives, we are on track for what our expenditure was to be in what year.
Okay, I guess I've done a bunch of questions for the minister and ministry about the housing, and I guess your numbers are not equaling the same numbers that I'm getting back on what they were talking about, like 240 additional homes that were supposed to be built for $9.4 million through the accelerator fund, and then also part of the 40 units they were trying to do at $4.3 million, which was like $357,000 a piece. So some of those numbers, I guess, not quite the same. I have one other question in regards, completely unrelated. There's a change with regards to the avalanche control, that they were going to change who's going to do it, and it's no longer going to be, I believe, the military. Was there a plan and for Parks Canada? What's their plan to deal with avalanche, considering there was over 20 some days on Highway 93 between Banff and Jasper? They were closed this year. We need to. This is fairly important for planning and going forward. And those people.
Mr. Stevenson, I'm sorry your time is up, but please, you can give a short answer.
And I can give a very short answer to that. We are in discussions with the Canadian Armed Forces for a transitional plan for the services that they will no longer be able to provide.
Very much. We will now turn to Mr. Watchhorn for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, and I will be splitting my time with the member from Victoria. Just to add to what Mr. Stevenson was saying before, my honourable colleague, I was a ski instructor at Lake Louise for a year in 1990, and then we made friends with the Avalanche Patrol because that was the best skiing we could ever have. So I have to give him that. Maintenant, au niveau des parcs au Québec, je sais pertinemment.
And regarding parks in Quebec, I know the Quebec government wants municipalities to protect 30% of land. Various municipalities have put forward projects in the context of a program that should be unveiled in 2028. Some municipalities gave projects that include public lands. Those public lands could be used for tourism right now, but the provincial government keeps them as potential clear-cutting land. So how could you help the municipalities to convince the Quebec government to protect those lands? There are a number of programs that Parks Canada has. The Corridors program, for example, where municipalities can work with us and with the Quebec government. That might be one of the better paths to use to make sure that the Quebec government plays its role, but we also have great agreements. For example, the Saguenay-Saint-Laurent Marine Park. We have great examples to have projects that are worked, co-managed with the Quebec government and with all municipalities along the St. Lawrence. I think there are opportunities here to look into the concerns, and I've always said that it's a condition for the other concerns. Second question, before I pass the microphone to my colleagues, how is the collaboration with CEPAC going, the Quebec Parks program? We have an excellent relationship with CEPAC. We have an excellent relationship. We share ideas. We work together. It's a great relationship, very positive. Thank you very much. I pass the floor to my colleague.
Afternoon to our witnesses. Thank you so much for being here. I'll direct my question to Mr. Campbell, but potentially Mr. Miller, given your role, you'd be well suited to answer it. We heard a moment ago from one of our colleagues about the fires in Jasper, and as a representative of British Columbia riding, and as we approach a wildfire season after a year with the low snowpack and other concerns about water availability, wildland firefighting is very much on the mind at this time. The plan that discussed under the nature strategy takes seriously the need to invest in wildland firefighting, especially in Western Canada, which is acutely vulnerable for a variety of reasons I've already touched on. Recognizing that climate change is a major driver of our worsening fire season, that fires are burning hotter, longer, and stretching further than ever before, endangering many communities, can you speak to what kind of investments are being made in services through Parks Canada to help address wildfire risk through a mitigation perspective or response through a firefighting perspective?
Yeah, I am happy to turn that over to Mr. Miller directly.
Sure. Great, thanks. So, I mean, I think we make investments in a number of different areas, and we do try and coordinate these very much with the provinces and territories through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre, so that we're kind of aligning capacity where it's most needed across the country. So we have approximately 300 wildfire-related staff that are either frontline crews or incident management specialists working across the country to prepare and respond to wildfires. We have resource sharing agreements with provinces and territories so that we can move personnel back and forth as needed. Like if they need a little extra capacity at BC on the ground, we can share our staff with them and vice versa. We also are working actively with communities to prevent the risk of wildfire, reduce the risk of wildfire. Obviously, with climate change, we are seeing more intense wildfire seasons, and it is a risk that we're obviously very paying close attention to. So we are working on using prescribed fire, forest thinning and vegetation management, and community fire guards to reduce the risk to valued assets and communities. In the past year, we conducted 44 vegetation management initiatives at 20 parks to create guards and buffers around communities and prone areas. Last year, we treated about 2,000 hectares with prescribed fire to reduce risk, and that was on top of about 1,000 hectares the year before. So all that to say, there's a lot of work going on from the prevention side to and risk reduction to being ready to respond and the actual response.
If I can just add one quick piece, Madam Chair, as well, because I know it's been a concern of this committee in the past. We use prescribed burn, but also, as Mr. Miller said, mechanical reduction, and mechanical reduction is being used extensively above the bench in both Banff and Jasper. As we had a previous question, just wanting to make sure that we provided that response.
Thank you very much to you both. Maintenant, on va à Monsieur Bonin.
Now, Monsieur Bonin has 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask again about Canada Strong Past. Is it possible to say, for this summer, for example, that when people come into the park, if they can't provide proof that they're Canadian, could they have to pay? Would that be something that would be possible? It depends on the place, but across Parks Canada, that would not be possible. In a place like Jasper and Banff, for example, we have employees who are normally at the boundaries of the park who are relocated inside the parks. So there would not be a way for a person to determine where people come from. So that's two major parks, and in a variety of major parks, it would not be possible. Okay, and is it possible for you to give data on where visitors for certain parks came from last year? For example, you said you don't have it across parks, but in some parks, could you have those data? Yes. The whole other, for the rest of the year, yes, except for during the Canada Strong Pass period, we have all those data. And we could extrapolate, but it's difficult because in the summer, things are different in spring and the fall. Does Parks Canada feel increased pressure linked to big infrastructure projects? Do you feel certain pressure on that, given that it could be problematic for your preservation of parks? Like every governmental organization, we have a system to prioritize our investments, and obviously we need to choose where the best places to invest are. Question. When it comes to the projects of national interest, are there any that threaten parks or your side of things? In terms of the projects of national interest that the Prime Minister has listed? Answer. It's not an issue for national parks, the major projects. Okay. Question. If not, did you deal with cuts in the last year in the context of the new budget? Could you tell us if there were budget cuts for this year or for the year to come? A short answer, please. In the budgets from last year, there was a $75 million cut in Parks Canada's budget. Thank you very much. We will now give the floor to Mr. Stevenson for 5 minutes.
I've got a few other questions in regards to following up with my colleague here has talked about the Canada Strong Pass. Some of the people in Banff, the residents of Banff, not necessarily the business owners, but the residents of Banff, have coined a term of over-tourism because of the Canada Strong Pass and the requirements that to handle a bunch of things, mostly in transportation, because they have now turned to cutting off and the certain areas, certain roads, Johnson's Canyon and Mullane Lake, you only have to get a bus. It's the only possible way of doing that. Can you elaborate on what kind of plans they're going to do into fixing this situation so that for most of them in Banff, their solution is not to have the Canada Strong Pass. That doesn't help the businesses. But the other problem that we have is necessarily how Parks Canada allows only certain operators after being pre-approved to work on that. So can you just explain how they're going to address this problem? Because Banff has got a different situation than parks across many of the other places in the country.
Yeah, so I'll use a couple of the examples that you had put forward through the chair. Obviously, I think one of the ways that we have done is continue investment in public transport. So we are a major contributor to Rome Transportation so that people can use public transport as they go around. And of course, the Rome network has expanded. We also have a process for, as you had mentioned, business licensure for taking people into some of these areas. That business licensure ensures that people are being taken there safely with tourism and tour operators that like any place that in the country where we're looking for good business operators and that they are permitted as those good business operators. So that is, again, one of the ways that we are moving. From that perspective, we continue to have growth in all of those areas of the number of Canadians that have been able to actually go and appreciate, as I know you are well aware. And it just means that they are doing things other than taking their cars to those places. We also are working on a full plan of how to ensure that people are looking at all of the opportunities that exist in Banff, Jasper, the Lake Louise area, Kootenay, Yoho, in being able to look at, there are many, many, many great places. People tend to congregate around a few, and as we know,
Well, they go to the best, as you're saying, I guess.
Well, or they go to the spot where they've seen the selfie that is on from the online influencer, and so we are trying to figure out how to allow them to do that quickly, and have others have
I'm
a more
going to pivot back
visit.
to Jasper here, because I have limited time here. In some of my questioning for Parks Canada, there has only been $7.5 million of the $15 million allocated for rent and license fee relief that's been delivered in regards to those that are experiencing problems with the Jasper wildfires. How many tenants have actually received the support, and why has only about half of it been allocated since it was distributed there?
Yeah, so this was support directly for people to be able to deal with soil remediation after the wildfire, I believe is what you're discussing, because that was the $15 million.
Well, okay, well, I guess I was under the understanding it's people have to pay rent to Parks Canada, specifically businesses, to operate there, and there was some relief on their rent and their license fees, but only about half of it has been done, and we're 2 years in now.
So all of the rent relief that people would apply for during that period, so we weren't charging for rents during the period of the rebuild, so it's all on a submission and basis. So again, that and I was going to say the same thing if we're talking about the soil remediation, because it was again based on people submitting to us. One of the issues that has come up certainly is around insurance, and people having to look at both their insurance and their payments in order to be able to see whether they
and a lot of those insurance
themselves.
companies have a 2-year rule to apply, and they haven't gotten, and 2 years is only like 60 days out. So
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson. Your time is up. We will now go finally to Mr. Grant for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses that came forward today. I really appreciate it. As you know, I'm from Vancouver, from the third largest metro area in Canada. I believe it was Mr. Fanjoy that asked a question about urban national parks, something that we're keenly aware of. And you mentioned there's 6 or so that have been put forward already. Like, how does that work? And are there any others that are coming forward, or has there been a limit that's been set on which parks could be available?
So we continue to work with municipalities that have support of the First Nations and the province, and we are trying to do that on a rollout so that there's equitable distribution across the country. So we await some other places, as you, I'm sure, are well aware. Or not everybody is that well aware, but Stanley Park in Vancouver is itself continues to be part of Parks Canada's family of places, although it is managed through a lease to the city and the Parks Board. So although we do not count that on the National Urban Park list, one could say we're doing well in Vancouver.
Great. And I wanted to talk a bit about National Historic Sites. There's a National Historic Site near my community of one of our ancient village sites. I was proud to be able to attend the designation of the Kamloops Indian Residential School as a National Historic Site. I know that they're designated that, but how are we protecting them? Because I know that they're not protected in a way that people can still go and develop on the midden where we live. So what sort of criteria are put in place there?
Yeah, and so maybe I will turn to Ms. Spence to answer that question.
Sure, thank you for the question. So Parks Canada proudly protects 171 National Historic Sites as part of our portfolio. But there are more than 1,000 National Historic Sites that designate national people, places, and events of historic significance to Canada. And in with the broader family of National Historic Sites, as we call them, we have a cost share program that supports both presentation and reconstruction of fabric every year. We have a public call out, and we spend about $2 million in support of projects each year.
Excuse me. So going back to the establishment of parks, and you talked about local Indigenous communities being a part of that. How much work is going into place to bring Indigenous knowledge and other things to ensure that the traditional historic overseeing of these beautiful pieces of land are being properly being a part of those?
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I will turn that immediately to Ms. Spence and then back to Mr. Miller if he has anything to add.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. So Andrew had mentioned earlier the new policy on Indigenous stewardship that provides us a framework in order for us to work collaboratively with Inuit, Métis, and First Nation communities, the more than 300 relationships that we have across the country in every province and territory. To both co-govern, but also to ensure that Indigenous knowledge is applied in the management of our places to the benefit of Canadians, and our mandate for ecological integrity, cultural integrity, and connection.
What she said.
1 minute. I'll cede my minute, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Grant. Okay, that wraps up our round of questioning. A very warm thank you to all of our witnesses today. We really appreciate your time. I know that a lot goes into preparing for being on the hot seat, so thank you very much. We're going to suspend briefly to go in camera. Members, please don't go far because we're going to do this quick, and then we have about 10 minutes of work. Thank you.